Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coverings 2021. What a great way to start. Thank you for being here 8 o'clock this morning. And I'm sure you're enjoying Orlando. I'm sure you're enjoying being out and about, and we are very glad to have you here. I'm Mark Heinlein. I'm the training director for the National Tile Contractors Association. And today's session is Tile Talks with the NTCA. And we've got three gentlemen here that I'm going to introduce you to very shortly. But let's take care of a little bit of business first. First of all, have you all signed in? Have you all checked in and have your badges scanned? If not, please see the people at the back of the room and make sure that you get signed in and that you're accredited for being here, especially if you're looking for an AIA or IDCEC credit. So make sure that you get signed in and find the paperwork in the back of the room. We have people that can help you. So today, again, the AIA accreditation is available. Our program is accredited, also for the IDCEC accreditation. Once again, I'm Mark Heinlein, Training Director for the National Tile Contractors Association. And we're here today with these three gentlemen. Carl Balzer, right here. And hello. Carl, could you say a few words about yourself? Who are you? What is your business? And where are you at?
My name's Carl Balzer. I live in Boca Raton, Florida in Palm Beach County. And I've been in business as a tile contractor for 23 years. And that's it. It's been good.
You've been tiling for quite a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Longer than that, actually. I've been tiling since I've been 16 years old, but I became a licensed tile contractor in 23 years ago, like 1998.
Okay, great. Is it a big job to get a license in your neck of the woods? Is it involved?
Yeah, you have to have another tile contractor qualify you, and you have to have a certain amount of time serving like an apprenticeship, and they qualify you, and then you fill out an application with the county, with Palm Beach County, and then you take 2 tests. One's business, and then the other has practices having to do with tile, marble, and terrazzo. And hopefully you pass it, because it's actually harder than it sounds. And you become a licensed tile contractor. I know that's different in a lot of the part of the country. I don't think that's normal. But for Palm Beach County, Broward, Dade, Miami-Dade, is it the same?
Mine is very different. You just pay, that's all.
You just pay? Yeah. Oh, and you have to pay.
Yeah,
I forgot you have to pay. That's part of it. They do background check on you and stuff like that.
So it's all very worthwhile. And becoming a licensed contractor whenever you can, you should. It's the law, I'm sure, in your area.
Correct.
Let's talk to Mike Weaver. Mike Weaver of Trendsetter Tile and Stone. Mike, can you tell us about yourself?
Yes, I'm also a licensed contractor in Palm Beach County as well as Broward County, Florida. And I've been an NTCA member for maybe going on 10 years, CTEF installer. And I was fortunate enough to be on the board of directors with the NTCA from 2016 to 2020. And I'm just really into helping contractors and homeowners get educated on things so nobody gets into trouble one way or another. And I took the same test that Carl took, and I've been doing tile since 1996. I actually worked under Carl for about 10 years. So I learned a lot from Carl.
That's terrific, yeah. Wealth of knowledge, everyone. We were fortunate to have Mike as a regional director for the NTCA, and Mike mentioned that he is a CTEF certified tile installer. Actually, all 4 of us here today are certified tile installers for the CTEF. You'll notice on the screen, each of us have our CTEF number right on the slide. So we can talk about that more later on. Let's meet Ivan Herrera. Hi, Ivan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ivan El Chino. I'm the guy that does the videos on the social medias. And I'm with the company, the Miami Floors. I founded in 2010. I've been involved in the tile industry since I was 16, and I eventually became a contractor in 2011, also a CTI in 2011. Since then, I've been trying to be involved in the industry as much as I can and make sure that I learn every day something new so I can do something better every day. Unfortunately, when I got my license, there was, and it's good and it's bad, there was really no test to go by. It's just a matter of filling out the applications and showing that you want to work for the Miami-Dade County doing a tile, and they eventually give you the license without any question whatsoever if you know or not how to install a tile. And that is good on one end, and that is bad on the other end, because now my industry is being affected very strong in my section, in my sector down there in South Miami.
Thank you, Ivan. Do we have any Florida contractors in the room with us today? Please raise your hand. Okay, we're going to learn about some issues that happen here in the state of Florida. I've got them up on the screen right now. Some of our learning objectives there in those top bullets, you'll see we're going to talk about something called a recessed shower pan, and that's what Mike is calling this, and he'll explain more about it. It's a shower pan that's recessed and no water management. We have to be the boss of water. That's what I'm fond of saying. And then something called a Miami sandwich. If you haven't heard about that, it's not very delicious and it doesn't work very well, and Ivan will tell us all about it. And we're going to start off with Carl talking about spot bonding. He's been in business for a long time. Spot bonding does happen in the state of Florida, and I can tell you it happens across the United States, and it's a big problem that we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about why these are not good habits, they're not good techniques, and they produce subpar performance in a tile installation. We're going to talk a little bit about methods that you should use to have a terrific tile installation that will stand the test of time and will help you understand how to achieve a tile installation, how to achieve better results that will stand the test of time. So if you have any questions, we want to interact with you. We do have a live online audience, so if you have a question here in the room, just raise your hand or say, hey, Mark, I've got a question, or hey, Carl, Mike, or Ivan, and our live studio or live audience out in the internet world will take questions from them as well. So let's get started with spot bonding and Carl Baltzer. Carl, we've got a picture of spot bonding on the screen here. What can you tell us about this technique?
Yeah, first of all, it's not a recognized installation method for installing tile on walls and floors. So basically they've taken dollops of mud and just either put them on the back of the tile, or maybe they applied them to the wall, and they just pushed the tile onto the wall to try and fix it. Maybe they thought that the wall was out of plane, and the best way to fix it was using the mortar to build it out to make the wall flat. And also there's no waterproofing membrane over it. It looks like Dent Shield. The drywall guy probably installed that, and that's probably drywall mud that's covering the screw heads, and it's probably taped with drywall. I mean, there's a ton of things probably wrong there.
Yeah, there's a
lot.
That installation, that was I think that was about 10 feet up, the top of it. So, and those tiles, this was actually one that my company had removed, and those tiles were barely hanging on there. I mean, they took the slightest amount of movement and they would come off. And that's the biggest problem with spot bonding, is that the thin set mortar is actually very weak when it's put together in a clump like that.
So why do people spot bond? I think I heard you say something about flatness. Where does flatness come into play in a tile installation?
Well, for floors and walls, for a tile that's under 15 inches, it's a 1/4 inch and 10 feet for flatness, and the same applies to walls. And if it's a larger format, 15 or over, it has to be an 1/8 inch and 10 feet. So basically you want to, if it's on a floor, because I've seen spot bonding done on floors, and I've seen it done on walls a lot, you want to fix whatever plane. You want to fix the floor with either self-leveling, prime it, put the self-leveling down, get the floor back into spec. And the same thing with the walls. You can correct the walls by either You could put screed lines up and pull the walls, or you could do the old school method where like they use the lath, mud work. You could shim the walls out by putting, scabbing boards to the side of the studs to bring the board into plane. And there's another method called wet shimming. I don't know if people do that or not, where you put thin set on the studs, and then you push the board into the wall, and then you put your level on and make sure it's plumb, and then you keep doing that, and you let it set, and then you put your screws in. But the board, it can't be a board that's, I would say, like Durock. It needs to be a stiff board, like Weddy board, probably Schluter. There's another one, Hydroblock, that just came out.
Some type of, any board that's not going to have flex.
Yeah.
So if the board manufacturer approves that method to flatten their substrate, that would be key. You want to check with your board manufacturer, and they say
True.
If you can do this with their board, follow their instructions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Carl, I want to get back to flatness, and why then, if people aren't flattening their substrate first, why aren't they doing that? Why are they going ahead and doing the spot bonding thing instead of flattening their substrate? Why do you think this happens at all? Do people understand that these spots really don't bond all that well, as evidenced here in this picture?
No, to be honest with you, I think they just get to the job, and it's usually everything is already done. A lot of times, you could possibly be working for a contractor, and everything is already set up. The board's already installed. You get there to the job, and you're looking at the board, you put your level on the wall, you're like, oh, it's way out. So how am I going to fix that and work and continue on without having to do? I'm just going to put spots on the back of the tile and just push it in, and then I don't have to worry about it. It's good to go. Just finish the job, move along, get paid, and that's pretty much what I think the mentality is.
How do we correct that? How do we get the information to people so that they understand that their systems, when they install them that way, are failing? How do we communicate that to them?
Well, as a tile contractor, you're supposed to communicate that to the contractor or the customer, that this is the correct way of doing it. And then it has to be education. Also, from the tile store too, has to hold a little bit of responsibility of telling, maybe
Educate the
yeah,
customer.
like pre-educate,
ahead of
yeah,
time.
educate the customer. Thank you. To give them a heads up that this is how it should be done. You don't want to see the guy in your shower spot bonding, because you just spent a lot of money on the tile and labor, and if it falls off the wall, somebody could get hurt, could damage something, and
So knowledge, Ivan, yes?
Yes, I want to add to it that I've seen installers that they truly believe that this system works. They will die for it. I had an experience in my own company, and I want to believe that that was one of the last bathroom that we did as a spot bonding, because we did, at some point in time, we did a spot bonding. And I have thought about it, like why we always did it that way. And it was, I want to think that we were under the illusion that it was impossible to put such a large tile with only just the trowel. And then I started thinking about it, and if you grab one of these tables and you just create a piece of glass and put it on, it will lay flat on top of that table. Same concept happens on a wall if your wall is flat enough. Now, if you really, every time you get to a job site, you get walls that are really, really bad, it's going to be hard for your mind to process that you can get such a large tile in such a bad wall and with just minimum thickness of thin set. But if installers could get to know, which the other second problem is, it got lost the fact of how to flatten a wall, how to screed a floor. I haven't learned to find nobody in Miami that can actually do a mud job on a wall. It's totally lost. So on the other end, we always relied on Durox, and these guys, they don't put as much effort to try to make these walls as flat as possible. But if you just tackle the fact that if you have a flat wall, you can definitely go with minimum thickness of thin set regardless of the size of the tile. It's just that simple. You can lay a big piece of glass on any of this table, and it will sit with only maybe 32nd of an inch in between. That's how fly can go.
I want to echo something that Ivan said. If you think about what he first said, he said he and his company have done spot bonding. They were under the delusion that it was going to work. And then he said something very important that caught my ear. He thought about what he was doing. He thought about and took a look, and he started to think about, how is this system really functioning? And he did some experimentation. And he eventually figured out that the bond coat thickness, the substrate should be flat, the bond coat thickness should be correct, and he's having successful installations. We have a question from the audience, sir.
Is this on? Earlier you said something, and Carl said something about the tile. You barely needed to touch it. They were falling off. They weren't bonding. Why wouldn't they bond to that big, thick blob on there? I mean, it's thin set, right? Why doesn't it?
Well, I would say probably because there could be a couple reasons. They didn't flat trowel the back of the tile. I don't know. Did they flat trowel the back of the tile? Is that the one?
No, in most instances, they don't scratch coat into the tile or the wall.
Yeah, for sure the one you couldn't see that was done on the wall at all. So normally you would definitely, on a wall, you want to key it in, and we always key the back of the tile in, and then we trowel it, and then we put it and install it. So that's probably why it didn't stick.
Well, I can say that the way a thin set mortar works when it dries out, if you have a large amount of it, it begins to dry around the outside or the exterior of this blob, and the inside of it is still wet. So you have the outside which dries, and then as thin set's drying, when it's in a large amount, it'll curl, it'll deform. And as it does that, now the bond that was made around the outside of the thin set is now breaking free from the bond made on the tile and the substrate earlier, while the inside is still trying to dry. So all of this, deformation of the thin set is what ultimately weakens it, and then it really, these installations sometimes fall, they'll have a problem right off the bat when someone goes to put the shower doors in. A guy will come to install shower doors, and if he's using a hammer drill, he'll loosen it up right off the bat. I've had customers call me up a week after they had somebody install a spot bonding job, and they said all the grout's falling out. And if the tile didn't fall off, it would be a matter of time before it did. Yes, sir.
So isn't there a minimum thickness that thin set can be also, right? I mean, it's going to shrink by being so thick, and that's a lot of the reason.
In thin set, it's meant to be applied in a thin layer.
Correct.
Yeah, there's different layers depending on the trowel size that you're using, depending on the size of the tile that you're going to be installing. But on every bag of thin set mortar, there's recommendations for what trowel to use with a certain size tile, and then that would give you the direction on which way to go forward with it.
Thank you.
Terrific. And spot bonding is also seen on floors. We've been looking at walls, and Carl and Mike, we're going to go on to a wall section that you have some slides coming up here. But Carl, first of all, before we go there, spot bonding on floors, why is that a danger?
Well, there's a couple reasons. First, they're going to have hollow spots. It's going to sound hollow when you walk on it. Also, there's point loading. Could be a lady's in her high heels and she's walking around. It's just enough pressure where it could pop the corner off, because they're probably not going to get coverage in the corners, most likely. They're going to put it close to the corner. It'll be one in the middle, maybe a couple on the sides. And it's not the correct way of doing it, first of all, right? So we need to get that out of the way. But, and then if you roll furniture across, could be anything heavy, it's going to break. And it's just poor installation method.
The system isn't properly supported.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in a wet area, Mike, we've got this sequence of slides. Can you describe what happened here, guys?
Yeah, this was a customer called me up, told me that they said to me they had a tile or two fall off the wall. And when I got there, this is the bathtub in the bathroom, and these are a couple of the chips and dents that were in there when I arrived, and there's many scratches in that tub. And the tiles had fallen in there. You can show the next slide. And so this is looking at that shower. They had a garbage bag up on the wall covering where these spots of thin set were. The distance from that entryway to that installation was about 10 feet. And what the customer told me was that they have a 4-year-old daughter went into the bathroom, and I don't know if she was throwing a fit or playing around or whatever, but when she went in there, she slammed the door. And when she slammed that door, half of that tile came off the wall and fell into the tub. So at that distance, for a 4-year-old to bring the tiles off the wall, you can see that these installations, they are more than just doing it wrong. It's really a safety hazard. So using this method puts a great deal of liability on the installer, and they need to stay away from it. Yes, sir.
How do you guys approach in your market when you go to do a repair on a job and you discover that it's spot bonded? How do you approach that conversation with the client, given that I'm sure that, well, for my part, when I discover these, I won't touch a repair. But how do you broach that with the clients?
Yeah, there's no repair for it. The shower is a failure at that point. You don't want to put your hands on it unless it's time to remove the entire installation. I don't really make a habit of repairing showers as it is, because I don't want to shake anything loose anywhere that somebody else did. Even if my work is great and nice and tight, I don't want the next guy, the last guy's work to come down. And so with these types of installations, as soon as I see them, I explain to the homeowner that I'm sorry that this happened to them and that another poor contractor got to them. I let them know up front there's nothing we can do for it except a replacement.
Spot bonding is an ultimate failure.
Yeah.
Okay. We could talk about spot bonding all day, and we probably should, but we've got a couple of other poor techniques that we want to go to next.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, absolutely, Carl.
There's only one place you can use spot bonding, and it's with epoxy.
Yeah.
It's a recognized in a TCA handbook. I think it's W15 and W60, but it can only be done with epoxy, and it can only be done interior applications. No wet. That's the only place.
And I believe it may only be by one manufacturer specifically that their product is approved for that.
I think it's Lat Epoxy. Latacrete is the one that made a system. It was like a gun. It has a 2-part system that came together, and they actually specifically promoted that. So
yeah, so
that's
it may have confused some installers back in the day, but it can't be confused any longer. So everybody here going forward, if continue to spread the word, and when you meet customers or you meet contractors and you let them know about this, this is how we get the word out, so it becomes familiar with everybody of how inappropriate it is.
So once again, know your industry standards, know the approved methods, and know the manufacturer's materials and follow their instructions. And that'll lead to success. And flatten those substrates to begin with.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have NTCA training programs specifically for flattening substrates. So come out and join those programs. Anything else to add on spot bonding, Carl?
Definitely do not do it on super large format tile. Cannot be done on super large format tile. Any tiles that are 3 foot by 9 foot, 5 foot by 10 foot, I'm getting into doing that a lot, and it's super important. It's very important for the walls have to be incredibly flat, and there's no spot bonding. You just everything has to be trowel. Oh, and also you have to trowel everything from the short side of the tile so you can get full coverage. So wet areas, 95% on the walls. 80% on the floors, outside 95% coverage. These are all coverage percentages. And that's all I got to add.
And watch NTCA's trowel and error video. We'll go over all of these things. Google NTCA trowel and error. It's on YouTube. Watch it. It's in English, Spanish, and now in Russian. Okay, let's shift over to something called recessed showers. Mike Weaver, what can you tell us about these?
A recessed shower, which sometimes is called below slab shower, is a shower where it doesn't have a curb in the way that that we typically install them. This shower just has a step down of approximately 2 to 4 inches down into the receptor area. And these showers, when they came about, were basically an upgrade for homeowners because they were a curbless shower, technically. There was no curb. So they could sell it as curbless. It was an upgrade, but it has some problems in its design that, especially when it came out, made it so water couldn't be properly managed. And so they were basically done raw, where the shower pan itself is just the concrete that rests below the slab area surrounding it. And as years went on and topical membranes became more of the norm, people would waterproof the walls, but they still wouldn't waterproof the showers. And so this is an image of one that when all the tile has been removed and everything, and at the moment there it has a weep hole drain. As we'll see later on, typically you won't find a weep hole clamping style drain there. But things to note here and why they didn't use waterproofing very often was because PVC liners were the primary method of managing the water. And in this shower, you can see around the edge of the shower where the walls are, there's actually a 1/2 inch lip. And that lip sits up at the height of the surrounding slab, and the wall board rests right on top of that lip. So the wall board's not going into the pan. So they were trying to keep the wall board out of the pan. But in doing that, if you were to try to use a PVC liner, this PVC liner would want to lap over the face of that. And since we can't install tile with a direct bond of thinset right to a PVC liner, you really don't have a way of having that liner come up and get behind the wall board. Also, you cannot lap the PVC liner up and over that step down area. So you had 2 areas where a PVC liner wouldn't work. So they just didn't do anything. They would just leave these raw. And we often find these showers in homes. Basically, that's almost a starting point where they would put their wall board up and start right there with that. You can go to the next slide. And so this one here, this is another below slab, but this one doesn't have the lip around the edge. You can see there's far more water damage on those studs, and that's because the wall board had extended very low into the shower pan area.
Was it cement board that they put on the walls? Are you seeing green board or cement board when you pull all these down?
Well, I mean, it varies. Sometimes they have used cement board. It depends on when it was done. I think this one might have been a green board one. But
So you'll see gypsum board in this application?
Oh, yeah.
You'll see anything?
yes, definitely.
Okay.
You can go to the next slide. And so this is showing the pipe, the 2-inch pipe that comes up out of the lower slab. And the next slide, this one, that's the drain that actually rests on top of the 2-inch pipe. You can see there's no clamping flange. There's no way to alleviate any water that would make it into the assembly through the tile, through the grout. This water would basically go into this cement receptor, and it would, go down further into the slab. And some problem associated with that in South Florida is termites, because termites are attracted to water sources, and this is a pretty regular on-the-clock water source for termites that doesn't flood them out, but it still provides them with enough water to get by. So we can show the next slide here.
Mike, I have a question for you first before we shift slides. How thick is this cement that we're looking at here? Is it a couple inches? Is it 6 inches?
The main slab that you see out there is approximately 4 inches. This area below the drain, depending on in South Florida where you are, the slabs down there, out east they might be 6 inches, but out west near the Everglades they can be 8 to 10 inches thick. So it's very thick. There is most of the time when I have dug into them, I have found a vapor barrier, because we need it. We need it really in every state, but in Florida especially, the water table is very high. So yeah, they vary in thickness. I mean, these types of receptors back in the day, some of them were also referred to as Roman tubs because they could be 24 inches deep with 2 steps leading down into them. And they would actually have a tub filling spout, and they were handled the same way as this one.
So we have the grade beneath, the dirt beneath, and then you said because there's a lot of water in Florida, there's a vapor barrier on top of the dirt or sand.
Yes.
Then you've got the concrete on top of that, and now we're looking at the top of that concrete layer that the
Yes.
tile rests on.
Yes.
So the water that doesn't make it down the drain rests on the tile, goes through the bond coat, seeps into this concrete, then lands on top of that vapor barrier and never really even makes it into the soil beneath, right?
Yeah, I'm not, you know, their idea was that since this area is recessed lower than the slab, it couldn't hurt the surrounding area because the water wouldn't be able to travel laterally out of the shower. In some instances that may be true, but often the wallboard is lower. This is just a way. It doesn't always present a job with a problem. Some of them can hang out and last a long time, but in no way is the water managed. And that's, you know, our primary focus when you're putting a shower together is you want that water in and you want it to get out. You want it to dry in between use. You don't want it to hang out to deteriorate any materials.
Is there a slope to the drain in this method?
What do you mean, the slope where?
Has the
The bottom of the slab, or top of the slab.
yeah, where is there any water management causing it to flow to the drain? Is there
No. I mean, you just have your upper slope, but you wouldn't have a double pitch like if you had a pre-pitch. There's no need for a pre-pitch because you have no weep holes for the water to evacuate. So it's literally trapped in there. You know, it's either it might come out in moisture vapor over a certain period of time. If the shower's used often enough, it's certainly going to retain that moisture. So if you have 2 or 3 people using that shower in any given day, it's not going to dry out thoroughly in between use.
And like you said, it could wick over to the wallboard, however that was installed, and get into the framing and ruin the structure.
Yes.
Okay. How do you solve this? Yeah, Ivan.
So technically, that's a mini pool.
Yeah.
It's a good way to see is just a very small pool in your shower. The problem with that is when you shower, you're going to lose stuff out of your body that will start collecting into that, and you'll start smelling. You're going to get odors out of that because that water's not going to go nowhere. It's going to start depositing. Eventually, you could grow some mildew and mold there, and that can become to some health issues to people that are sensitive to molds and stuff like that. So you might be sick and you don't know why. Maybe it's your bathroom that is sicking you out.
Yeah, they often can smell like a mildew type of shower, especially as soon as the tile comes off, you can tell that water's been hanging out in there.
So it's important that aesthetics don't override practicality. It has to make sure that the way the system is made, it exits the water as fast as possible.
So what do you do with this, Mike? I've got another slide up here. What are you showing us here?
Okay, well this shower right here is in the process of becoming B421 or 421C. And this is, some contractors will refer to this as the divot method, where you install the lower part of the clamping flange drain and then create your pitch, and it divots towards the lower part of the shower drain. And then in the next slide here, we'll see this is what it looks like when the divot is basically complete. There's blue tape on top of the clamping flange to protect it so the weep holes don't get any mortar into them while the pitch is being created. And you can see that how it's angled. And this is so the shower can be waterproofed all the way down to that divot, the same way that a PVC liner would, except with this divot, the only part of the mortar, your dry pack that would be exposed to water, is in this area directly around the drain.
Mike, we have a question.
Yes.
Mike, just curious, do you meet with your builder, or how do the builders respond, and have you done talks to the builder? Because this looks like a communication issue that you have to address with your local builders, right?
Yes. Builders are tough sometimes because they're they have a great knowledge of many things, but sometimes these shower receptors, the design of them, they're not too familiar with them, and this procedure can take just a little bit longer. And maybe when someone's trying to be super cost effective, it certainly is easier just to leave the shower raw, and the guy can come in and just start getting involved instead of waiting for anything to dry and stuff. But I mean, there are many products on the market that are available that dry fairly quickly. And this method we chose to show on the slides because it does use the clamping flange drain. This can also be done with the integrated bonding flange on one of these showers. But a builder will often sometimes put the clamping flange drain in. They'll do that much, they'll put that in, but then the tile contractor might not take it to the next step. So it's hard to get builders completely on board because they don't have the time or they don't want to understand it. Oh, it's always been fine, I've never had a problem. I mean, a lot of these builders will do something and never look back. And they really don't know what the performance of a shower has been. You know, they're kind of concerned with maybe some bigger details over an entire home. So it's our job to bring it to their attention. And if that builder doesn't want to go about doing it the correct way, well, then there's other builders that will, and those are the ones that everybody should do business with.
Okay. And you're showing us some surface supplied membrane
Right.
here.
Yeah. So this is that same divot method. This one, the clamping flange is actually removed at this time. You can see how the waterproofing comes down and goes to the lower part of the drain. There's blue tape on there, again, still protecting the weep holes where the clamping flange will sit over those weep holes. And you can see the waterproofing going all the way around to that divot as in a sheet membrane form, and then the paintable membrane on the inside of the divot. So everything is waterproofed right to that area. And then the next slide here, this one shows you what it looks like when the dry pack mortar is actually put around that drain area. So as you can see, the water would run down the membrane, encounter this dry pack, and then it would make it to the weep holes. So that way you're preserving the intended design of a clamping flange drain without using a PVC liner.
Question, Mike.
Yes.
On that divot method, is there any problem with natural stone around the divot? Because it's going to hold water longer than
No, not at all. In fact, this method actually helps evacuate water faster sometimes than an integrated bonding flange. A bonding flange, because modified thin-set mortars are denser, they can slow down the volume of water. That's it, because an integrated bonding flange works similar to a weep hole system, except it's kind of closer up, it's wider, it doesn't use holes, it's just kind of got its own little ramp. And that ramp sometimes has a slightly bit more thin set than the surrounding area. So sometimes with certain stones, translucent stones, glass tile that's on a shower pan, with an integrated bonding flange, sometimes because it can't dry out so fast towards that drain because the thin set mortar is slowing it down, you can get this darkness in the stone where it's actually just wet. Or through the glass, you can see it straight through the thin set. If you look through the glass, how the mortar is darkened up. And it's because the shower's been used a little bit more frequently than that shower can get rid of that water. So this method right here is a very effective way when using stone to get that water out quick, because once it gets to that dry pack, it's just going to go right to the weep holes. And so often when I have the choice and I find out that people are using a certain type of stone and I don't want to risk the stone darkening up around the drain, I'll go right to this method when I can.
What is this drawing showing us here, Mike?
Okay, so this is a 421C, and this is a typical, this is a curbless shower using that method. You can see the angled lines at the drain showing the divot, and this shower is very similar to what a curbless is, because essentially in the TCA guides, they do not have a shower receptor in the drawing that shows a below slab shower. And so a contractor would need to know, well, what is the closest thing to achieving waterproof or water management that I can take from the TCNA book. So this drawing here, showing this curbless, we've modified a drawing to give an example of what that would look like. You can show the next slide there. So this one right here, you can see the wallboard resting on the lip of the surrounding slab. You can see that just like your shower curb has to be a 1/4 inch per foot in the direction towards the drain, the same thing goes with the step down. You have to have that within the glass enclosure, you would have to have that pitch towards the shower drain. And it follows everything that 421 does with the waterproofing, coming down the entire assembly from the top, following your mortar pitch down towards the drain, and then heading towards the weep holes. And so this is essentially the same thing. And the great thing about these showers, if there's a great thing about a below slab shower, is that if you were going to do a truly curbless shower, this concrete's already excavated for you, because it's, you get into some jobs and there's a tremendous amount of concrete you might have to get down depending on how long the shower is. If the shower's longer, you're going to be going down deeper. You got to keep that 1/4 inch per foot as you go. So if you have a drain 5 feet away, you're going way down just to have the pitch. You also have to accommodate the drain body. So with these showers, you've already got most of the concrete out of the way. You just have to remove a little bit, say, for the drain body in the drain area, or if you're relocating the drain to the back wall or to the other side. But for the most part, you don't have to spend hours of chipping out concrete. And for the most part, you won't be interrupting a vapor barrier that already exists, instead of having to reapply another vapor barrier.
So when you run across one of these, it might be a great opportunity to do a true B421C method.
Correct, yeah. When I'm speaking with homeowners and I see one of these showers, if they tell me they want a curbless shower, I'm like, all right, we're already halfway there. Somebody literally did the hard part, and if they weren't familiar with the curbless shower, didn't even realize, these showers are great candidates right off the bat. So I make the customer aware that if they did want to do it, that option's available to them. Otherwise, I might not go through the trouble of telling them, oh yeah, we could do a curbless shower for you, because I'm not interested really in removing that concrete, maybe, because it's a lot of work, But if they want one, we would do it, but below slab takes some of the work out.
So yes.
I've run into several jobs where they just leave the concrete completely out.
Yes.
And not just recess it. You got this, when you show up at the job site and you got this hole.
Yes, it's dirt. Just dirt.
It's
Yeah.
dirt. Or if it's a heated basement floor, you got styrofoam with tubes running through it. What do you do with something like that? Walk away? That's what I do.
I don't know. Basements don't exist in my world. I work in South Florida, and the water is right below us.
This was actually on slab.
Okay. I have in South Florida seen some that once the old pan came out, there was dirt right there. It was like they didn't put enough concrete to actually make a slab that should be 4 inches deep. It's at that point that maybe I'd have to remove a little bit more dirt to bring it down a little bit more, put in a vapor barrier myself, and then install 4 inches of concrete. And then from that point, I could begin my assembly after that.
Don't you have a cold joint all the way around?
I'm sorry?
Don't you have a cold joint all the way around the pan that can move up and down?
I don't know.
So you may have a cold joint with that pour, and what you may have to do is you might even need to get a concrete contractor or bore some holes, put some rebar reinforcement that ties it all in to the existing slab.
Right, that would be in there along with the expansion that they sell for concrete projects. That's very tall and a 1/2 inch wide. That would go in between these areas all the way around it to provide for expansion for that new concrete.
Yeah. The problem we had was the heated floor was already there, so how do you lower all that to get?
It's a problem. Lot to think
Right.
about, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
I just walked away.
No,
I
it,
just
may,
said,
it
"Get
would
somebody
involve
else."
somebody with a greater knowledge of those assemblies than myself.
Other contractors might
Yeah.
need to get involved.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. Mike, do you have anything else to add? We want to move on to Ivan with the
No.
Miami sandwich.
Thank you.
All right, Ivan, what can you tell us about the Miami sandwich?
Who likes sandwich? And who likes Miami sandwiches? I personally don't like it. It's a method that is being adopted in my industry in Miami to pretty much install large format tile. That's anything passing 15 inches. So it gets applied on everything. So in Miami, the smallest tile we really do is 24 by 24. That's our smallest. So we do 30 by 30, 36, 48, 60 by 60, and now 10 by 60. So we do fairly large tiles in Miami. And I want to say I learned the industry in 1998. I learned it. So back then, I already saw the mud set being used, and I learned it. It took me 2 weeks to do 300 square feet. So, so this is a method where you put thin set on the floor, you put a bed of mortar, and then you scratch the back of the tile, and you practically make a sandwich. So 2 layers of thin set with 1 center of mud. The funny thing is that this concept is not the proper way to do tile.
We have a video
And
here.
we
Can
have
you
a video.
describe?
Maybe I can.
Ivan's going to describe what's happening.
So this
here.
is a condominium. This was about 2 inches thick application of mud set or Miami sandwich. The top layer that you see, the white layer, is a skinny layer of thin set. You can see how easily it gets detached from the tile, how it shears off. And what happened with that installation was that there was no grout joint whatsoever. There was large windows there, so there was the expansion and contraction was definitely happening there. There was no soft joints whatsoever. And lastly, the method that was used is not really doing you any favor. So that was a whole failure. Now, I want to think, and I'm going to get this from you because you explained it this really good. When this system is getting done, that you put the tin set on the floor, the mud bed, and then you put the tin set on the back of the tile, and you start pounding the tile, squeezing, compressing that mortar, something is happening. It's water is migrating up into the substrate, into the top of the mortar. So that's creating a bond breaker right there at that moment in time. And you eventually walk away and you hope that everything is bonded, but you actually push the water up between mortar and the tin set, and that water is loosening up the components of the cement. So this is all working against you. So that's why when I come with just the hammer, you can easily attach, because the cement at that point, it has been just strongly watered down. So
The next slide will show how they actually do it.
I want to ask about the stucco mortar. There's something called stucco mortar
yeah,
in
so
here.
it's
What's
stucco
that all
mortar.
about?
So that's the other, the product between that we use is a stucco mortar, and that was never meant to be used for tile installation whatsoever. So I want you to bring to the table that we should use the right products for the right installation. Stucco mortar, sand mix, mortar mix, none of these mixes are adequate to do tile installations at all.
So this is a sequence of how this is done? Is that what this
So
is?
this is the tools on the top. So you start by slide number 2, you do the tin set on the floor, then you put a layer of mud. You kind of play around with it, you know, a nice little beautiful design on it. You back butter the back of the tile, and then you start pounding it. And number 7, you put a level, and that's what you get. You get a thick layer. You're adding thousands of pounds into any specific apartment in Miami, so I want you guys to think about that. And
What you were saying is, like, in that picture down on the bottom left, the mortar looks quite wet. It's because the mud is mixed like a fat mud. This is not a dry pack.
It's not. It's
Right.
definitely not. So there's a system that is supposed to be done as a dry pack where you compound down the mud bed, pretty much on a dry pad, like sandcastle type consistency mortar. But you got to walk away until that dries and come back to it and install it. Here is everything getting done at the same time all on a wood application. Now, we don't really know. We think that it works, but we don't have nothing that proves that says, yes, it works on a wood application. You can do all two products together, thin set plus mortar, on a wet application, and it will bond. We haven't tested that. So in the meantime that we haven't tested that, we got to make sure that we use the right process of installation until that gets tested, if ever.
And the thing, like he was talking about with the water, what happens is that when they hit the tile with the mallet, the aggregate in the stucco mortar mix sinks to the bottom and it pushes the water up to the top. And this water now reacts with the thin set bond coat that they tried to make. And if it's a porcelain tile and you have that impervious porcelain up top, that's where the bond breaker comes in that he was talking about.
We have a question from the audience.
So functionally, if this is done with a dry pack that is mixed correctly, how is this different from a traditional wet set method aside from broadcasting pure Portland and wetting it instead combing thin set onto the back of the tile?
You want to answer
Well,
that?
yeah, I mean, this method is very similar. In fact, that's one that I'm not terribly familiar with, and I haven't had to, in all my years, really install it like that. The main reason that this method becomes a problem is because of the actual use of the stucco mortar mix. Stucco mortar is meant to be no greater than 1/2 inch. And some of these installations can go as much as 1.5 inches when the subfloor drops. So they'll typically start off the highest point on the floor with maybe 1/4 inch of this stucco mortar. So, you know, the thin set is super wet on the top and the bottom. And then that stucco mortar is also wet, and it's also in a very thin layer. Now, as you're going across the floor, the stucco is getting thicker and thicker, past the point where it's supposed to be. And so, since it's being used beyond its limitations, the bond, it's a very weak bond, especially when it's used with a porcelain tile. And the reason why this installation is so bad is you'll see in some of the photos that it eliminates the use of possible membranes that you would use. Like, you couldn't use an uncoupling membrane with this because you can't put it underneath that mortar mix. And since everything's going down wet, you can't install that uncoupling on top of your layer of thin set. You know, and so this would also eliminate waterproofing, and there's problems with sound control.
So
And
yeah,
I think,
I want to emphasize into that because we do all these condos in Miami. We have all these buildings up there. So you come, you do any specific membrane, whichever the building requires you to do there. And then you cut with this thick bed. Now the whole system of the waterproofing, of the soundproofing is gone. Soundproofing is meant to be used on a thin set application, now with a thick bed. So that gets canceled out. So your waterproofing, your soundproofing, sorry, I've been doing a lot of waterproofing lately. Your soundproofing is not effective anymore. Now I want you to also think that by adopting this concept and not being a process that is being accepted by the industry, everything that you're installing is really not getting no warranties whatsoever. So you having the customer spend thousands of dollars on these beautiful porcelain floors, but none of this is backed up by a warranty because it's not a specified, it's not a specific system. So that's the first thing we got to look out. We cannot just put at risk so much out there for the customer.
And Ivan, if I could add to the question, we're not getting the proper compaction that you would in a thick bed. And if you heard Ivan say, the smallest tile he installs is a 24 by 24, and they're tapping that in with this cute little rubber mallet. So our compaction is non-existent, essentially. The water migration coming up, no compaction, the wrong materials, multiple things creating failures. What are we seeing? Oh, Carl, do you have something?
Yeah, to his question, was it absorbative tile, that method where you have the Portland and you're saying you sprinkle Portland on top?
Yeah,
That was,
I've seen people install porcelain, not by
porcelain.
broadcasting, but porcelain, but basically the same idea where you're notching thin set onto the back of the tile and then beating it into the dry pack. And that's why I was curious if you did that sort of modified traditional wet set, what the difference was here. But now I understand that with the stucco mud and the lack of compaction and the lack of adequate thin set, it's a failure in a lot of ways.
Yes.
This method.
yeah, because a long time ago there was a method where you dry pack a pan, you dry pack it, you take thin set and unsanded thin set and sprinkle it over the top, and then you would soak the tile in water, and then you would just push it down into it. So I thought that's what you were talking about.
And what you described is a wet set method
Yeah.
recognized by the ANSI standards.
Oh, so it doesn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What Carl just
I think
described.
they have a
So
question?
you can't use porcelain.
Yep. We need to move on with our slides, Carl. Ivan, what are we seeing here?
Well, I see two guys working effortlessly, putting a lot of mortar down and
I'll
trying
say-
to get that floor fairly flat.
You can see how many buckets each one of these guys has.
Yeah.
Because the stucco mortar, whereas a traditional bag of thin set might get you anywhere from 35 to 50 square feet, a bag of stucco mortar or bucket of stucco mortar will get you approximately 14 square feet.
At the best.
Yeah, at the best. So therefore, one bucket of mud is only going to get you maybe a tile and a half if it's a large format tile. So there's a tremendous amount of labor involved with these. There's no advantage in terms of labor. And that's just a picture of the how it's clumped up prior to the tile being hammered into place.
We have a question.
Yes, when you're using two different products like that, the thin set's going to dry at a different rate than that stucco stuff, and that causes shearing it back where we are. A job like that you're showing, why wouldn't you use self-leveling? We do it all the time. It's quicker, labor is cheaper, and you're ready to go. I mean, instead of
Self-leveling,
doing
a
it all that
good
way.
alternative?
So
We
yes,
use
self-leveling is a good alternate, and I have pushed that agenda in Miami a lot. Now, believe it or not, most of the installers in Miami don't know what a self-leveling is. So when you speak about self-leveling, they
Well,
really
I'm coming
don't.
down to Miami then.
Yeah, so,
But I see the door
be in for a
too,
shock,
if it's
dude.
hot, that sun beating in too, where you can have failures from that sun beating in a
Yep.
lot of glass.
yep, most
Couple
definitely.
more slides to look at here. This is that sound membrane that you heard Mike talk about a little bit. Sound barrier.
Right, yeah, that's an impervious material. I think that happens to be a marble on top of there. But if there was a porcelain tile on top of there, you have two impervious surfaces creating this sandwich. And the moisture content inside there stays very high, and these tiles will sound hollow right off the get-go. They're not debonded, but because of the way a sound membrane works, when it's not close to that tile, you can get a different sound effect than the way it's meant to work and disperse that sound laterally across the installation.
So a brief review. We learned about the recessed shower. We learned about how to manage that properly. We learned about this thing called the Miami sandwich, and we learned about spot bonding, why all of these do not produce great results. We did discuss some installations and ways to improve upon our installations, tile industry standards, methods, best practices, and manufacturer's instructions, proper tools and materials. And to find out how to do this better, I would love for all of you to visit us at the NTCA booth 4030 on the show floor right after this. We'll be there all week. Come meet with us there. We'll be there. You can meet these gentlemen in person. And please join me in thanking Mr. Ivan Herrera, Michael Weaver, and Carl Balzer. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.